the cake in the passenger seat. That's what I keep coming back to. Not the flight, not the 2-hour drive through the mountains in a rental car I almost couldn't figure out how to start. The cake! I'd spent 3 hours the night before making his favorite brown butter bourbon cake with salted caramel frosting, the one his mother used to make him every birthday before she passed. I learned the recipe from a handwritten index card she left behind. I practiced it twice. I packed it in a white box, taped it carefully, set it on the seat beside me like it was something precious, which I guess I thought it was. My husband's name is Kieran. We'd been married for 7 years when this happened. 7 years of birthdays, of holidays, of building something I genuinely believed in. He's an architect. Tall, broad-shouldered, the kind of man who makes you feel safe just standing next to him. That's the thing nobody tells you about being betrayed by someone like that. The safety was real. I didn't imagine it. It just wasn't the whole truth. I should back up. My name is Imogen. I'm 38. I work as a senior project manager for a healthcare consulting firm based in Denver, which means I spend a lot of time on planes and a lot of time in conference rooms and very little time doing anything I'd actually call living. I make good money. I've always made good money, even before Kieran and I got together, which matters to this story more than I wish it did. We met at a work event 11 years ago, a fundraiser gala for a children's hospital where a colleague of mine had dragged me against my will. Kieran was there with a client. He spilled red wine on my dress. He was so horrified, so genuinely mortified, that I laughed for the first time all evening, and we ended up talking for 3 hours in a corner while the party happened around us. He asked me to dinner the following week. By the end of that year, I knew I was going to marry him. My father liked him. That meant something to me then. My father is a careful man, the kind who watches and listens before he says anything, and he shook Kieran's hand at Thanksgiving that first year and told me afterward, "He's solid, Imogen. You can tell." I filed that away. I held on to it. We got married in the fall. Small ceremony, mountain venue, the kind of wedding that looks effortless in photos because you spend 18 months making it that way. No prenup. My father brought it up gently, once, about 6 weeks before the wedding. I remember I laughed a little and said, "Dad, it's Kieran." He didn't push it. I don't think he pushes things he knows won't land. For the first few years, everything was what I thought it was. We bought a house in a neighborhood we loved in Denver, the kind of street where people wave at each other from their driveways and know each other's dogs by name. Kieran's practice was growing. He'd taken on 2 junior architects, started doing bigger commercial projects. I got promoted. We were building something. I could feel it. The first thing I noticed, looking back, was that he stopped telling me things. Not in a dramatic way. Not in a way I could have named at the time. It was more like the texture of his conversation changed. He used to tell me everything, every small frustration, every project update, every awkward thing that happened with the client. And then, gradually, he stopped. The updates became summaries. The summaries became fine. Busy, the usual. I told myself it was stress. I told myself I was projecting, that I was tired from my own work and reading into nothing. The second thing was the money. About 2 years ago, I noticed a pattern in our joint account that I couldn't quite explain. Withdrawals, not huge, but regular. $800 here, $1,200 here. Always cash. When I asked, Kieran said he'd been paying a contractor in cash for some work on the office, a local guy who didn't take cards. It made sense. I moved on. It didn't stop. By last year, the withdrawals had totaled something closer to $40,000 over 18 months. I'd started keeping a quiet tally in a notes app on my phone, the way you do when you don't want to believe what you're seeing, but you can't quite stop looking at it. When I brought it up the second time, more directly, Kieran sat down at the kitchen table and looked at me with this expression I'd never seen on him before. Not quite irritated, not quite worried, something in between, and told me he'd had a rough stretch with one of his biggest commercial clients, that a project had stalled, that he was managing some cash flow issues and hadn't wanted to stress me out with it. He said he was handling it. He said he was sorry he hadn't told me sooner. I believed him. I should have believed him less. The cabin trip came up in February. His college friends, he said, a group of 4 guys he'd known since his freshman year at CU Boulder. They did a trip every couple of years, he said. Nothing special, just a long weekend in the mountains at a rental cabin. He'd mentioned these guys before, enough that it didn't feel invented. He showed me the rental listing on his phone. He bought hiking boots, the kind with ankle support, the kind that said, "I am a person who plans to actually go hiking." He packed a duffel bag. He left on a Thursday. I was supposed to be in Phoenix all weekend for a client engagement. The project had been on my calendar for 2 months. But on Friday morning, about 18 hours after Kieran drove away, my client called and told me the meeting needed to be pushed, an internal restructuring. Nothing to do with us. Could we reschedule for 2 weeks out? I said, of course. I hung up. I sat in my hotel room for a moment and I thought about the brown butter bourbon cake. I know that sounds strange, but it was his birthday weekend. He'd turned 40 on the Thursday he left, and we'd celebrated quietly at home the week before because of my trip. And I'd promised him a proper cake when I got back. And sitting in that hotel room with an unexpected free weekend, I thought, what if I just brought it to him? What if I drove up there with the cake and surprised him, and we had one night in the mountains before I flew home? I want to be clear, I wasn't suspicious. I was romantic. Or trying to be. I was trying to be the kind of wife I thought he deserved. I changed my flight, rented a car at the Phoenix airport, drove back to Denver, baked the cake in our own kitchen on Friday night, packed a bag, and left at 6 in the morning on Saturday. The cabin was about 2.5 hours away, up past Breckenridge, on a road that got narrow and unpaved for the last few miles. I had the address from the listing he'd shown me. I'd looked it up on maps. My phone signal dropped about 40 minutes out, which is why I hadn't called ahead. I told myself it would be more fun as a surprise anyway. The drive was beautiful. October in the Colorado mountains is something I've always loved. The aspens turning yellow, the sky that particular shade of blue that you only get at altitude. I had the windows cracked and a playlist going and the cake box secured on the passenger seat, and I felt, for the first time in a long time, like I was doing something right. Like I was showing up in a way that mattered. The cabin appeared around a bend in the road. It was bigger than I'd expected. A log and stone structure with a wide covered porch, a stone fire pit out front, 2 trucks parked in the gravel alongside Kieran's SUV. There were lights on inside. I could see figures moving behind the window as I pulled up. I parked behind the last truck, where I was mostly hidden by the tree line. I got out, got the cake box, and walked toward the porch. The front door was ajar just a few inches, and I could hear voices inside. The low rumble of male conversation, and underneath it, a game playing on a TV somewhere. And then I heard Kieran's voice. I wasn't eavesdropping. I need to say that. I was 20 feet from the front door, holding a birthday cake from my husband, about to knock. I wasn't hiding. I wasn't looking for anything. He said, honestly, at this point, if she just disappeared, the life insurance would take care of everything. 47 in Colorado. We've got a $2 million policy. One of the other men said something I didn't catch. Kieran laughed. It was his real laugh, not his social laugh, not his company is over laugh. I know the difference. I'm serious, he said. It would solve every problem. Clean slate. A second voice said, and you'd finally get to stop pretending you're happy. There was a pause. And then Kieran said, yeah. That was the word that broke something in me. Not the insurance talk, which I had not yet fully processed. The yeah. The ease of it. The relief in it. I stood on that gravel path with a birthday cake in my hands and the October wind coming off the mountain, and I did not move for a long time. I'm not sure how long. Long enough that my arms got tired. Long enough that a bird somewhere in the tree started and stopped calling. Long enough that the voices inside moved on to something else. Football scores, somebody's brother-in-law, a contractor they all knew. I walked back to my rental car. I set the cake box on the passenger seat. I sat in the driver's seat and I did not cry, which surprised me. I thought I would cry. Instead, I felt something very still and very cold settle over me, like I'd stepped into a lake and the temperature had simply changed around me. I drove back down the mountain. I did not knock on the door. I did not confront him. I know people think they would in that situation, that they'd walk in there and throw the door open and demand answers. But I knew, in that cold, quiet way, that confronting Kieran in front of his friends, in a cabin 2 hours from the nearest police station, with no one who knew where I knew it wasn't safe. Not if what I'd just heard was even half true. So I drove. I stopped at a gas station about 45 minutes down the mountain and sat in the parking lot and thought about the $40,000. I thought about the cash withdrawals. I thought about the way he'd said clean slate. I thought about the life insurance policy I hadn't thought about in years. $2 million, which we'd taken out 5 years ago when we bought the house, which I had always assumed was just responsible adulting. I called my sister. Her name is Philippa, and she's 4 years older than me, and she is the most practical person I have ever known in my life. I told her I needed to come to her house. I told her I couldn't explain on the phone. She said, "Are you safe right now?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Then drive." I drove 4 hours to her house in Fort Collins. She met me at the door in her bathrobe. I handed her the cake. She looked at it, then at me, then she stepped aside and let me in. I told her everything. All of it. The money, the voice, the yeah. She listened without interrupting, which is not characteristic of her, which told me she understood the weight of what she was hearing. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You're not going home." I said, "I know." She said, "And you're not calling him tonight." I said, "I know." What she did next is the reason I am the way I am now. Philippa pulled out her laptop and started making a list. Not emotional, not dramatic, just systematic. She's an accountant. She approaches crisis the way other people approach spreadsheets, identify the variables, map the exposure, control what you can control. She helped me write down every joint account, every asset, every credit card, every piece of financial infrastructure Kieran and I shared. Then she helped me make a plan. The following Monday, I called a family law attorney in Denver, a woman my colleague had used 2 years prior and spoken highly of. She got me in that same week. I sat across from her in her office on the 16th floor of a building downtown, and I told her what I'd heard, and she listened, and then she explained to me very carefully the difference between what I had witnessed and what could be legally proven. She was not unsympathetic. She was also very clear. She told me, "Document everything. Get your own accounts. Do not move marital funds. Do not tip him off." And she said, and this is the part that stayed with me, she said, "Whatever you decide to do about the criminal element of this, that's your choice. But protect yourself first. Then decide." I opened a personal checking account that week, at a different bank from our joint one. I moved my direct deposit. I got my own credit card. I changed the passwords on my personal email, my work accounts. Everything tied only to me. I contacted the insurance company, the one that held the $2 million policy, and I asked what the process was for updating or reviewing a policy. Just questions. They answered them. I kept going to work. I kept texting Kieran. He came home Sunday night from the cabin trip and I was there, at the kitchen table with a glass of wine, and I smiled at him and he kissed me on the cheek and I said, "How was it?" And he said, "Really good. Really needed that." I said, "I'm glad." He had no idea. The next 6 weeks were the strangest of my life. I was living in two realities simultaneously. In one, I was Imogen, Kieran's wife, the woman who had dinner with him 3 nights a week and asked about his projects and laughed at his jokes. In the other, I was someone quietly building a case, a foundation, an exit. My attorney helped me compile a record of the financial withdrawals. She connected me with a forensic accountant, a quiet man with wire-rimmed glasses who spent 3 weeks combing through our joint accounts and business records, and who found something that made my blood go cold. Kieran had taken out a secondary life insurance policy on me 14 months ago. A different company, a separate $500,000 policy, the kind you apply for without your spouse necessarily being notified. I had never signed anything. He'd used a digital signature service, and the signature on the application was close to mine but not mine. I sat in the forensic accountant's office and looked at the document, and I felt something shift permanently inside me. This was not a man in financial distress who'd said something terrible in a moment of dark humor. This was a man with a plan. I called Philippa. She didn't say "I told you so" because she's not that kind of person, but I could hear in her silence that she'd been waiting for me to find this. I went back to my attorney. She got on the phone with a colleague who handles fraud cases. They referred me to the DA's office. I gave a statement. I provided the financial records, the account for the secondary insurance policy, a timeline of the withdrawals. I told them about what I'd overheard at the cabin, and I told them I could not prove it beyond my own account, but that the financial pattern, together with the fraudulent policy application, told a story I did not need to tell alone. The process from there was slow and impersonal, the way legal things are. I'm not going to pretend it was satisfying in the way that movies make it look. There were weeks when nothing happened, and weeks when I got a call from someone at the DA's office with a question about a document, and weeks when I just went to work and did my job and waited. What I can tell you is this. Kieran was contacted by investigators in January. The fraudulent insurance application became the center of the case. It was the one piece that was provable, documented, clear. He was charged with insurance fraud and identity theft. His architecture license is under review. The story, to the degree that there is one, is still ongoing in the legal system as I write this, but he is not in our house, and I am. I'll tell you the thing I didn't expect, which is Kieran's younger sister. Her name is Waverly. She's 32, and she'd been close to me for most of our marriage. We'd text regularly, have lunch when she was in Denver, that kind of thing. When everything came out, she called me. She was crying. She said she was sorry. She said she'd had a feeling something was wrong with Kieran for a long time, but she hadn't known what to do with it, and that she should have said something, and she didn't know if I could forgive her for that. I told her she didn't have anything to be forgiven for. I meant it. She was as surprised as anyone. Waverly and I have had dinner twice since then. I don't know exactly what our relationship is now, with the marriage dissolved and everything that goes with that, but I know that she is not her brother. And I know that the people who matter tend to make themselves known in moments like this. I never delivered the cake. Philippa and I ate it that first night in Fort Collins, the two of us at her kitchen table at midnight. And it was good, really good. The salted caramel and the bourbon coming through. The brown butter giving it something warm and complicated underneath. I'd been proud of it. I still am. A little, which feels absurd and also completely true. I've been seeing a therapist since November. She's helped me understand something I've been circling around for a while, which is that I didn't miss obvious signs so much as I trusted the structure I'd built. I trusted the story. I'd done everything I was supposed to do. The good job, the good marriage, the good house, the careful attention. I thought competence was protection. It isn't. There's a version of me that wonders what would have happened if the Phoenix meeting hadn't been canceled. If I'd stayed in that hotel, come home Sunday evening, gone on with my life not knowing. I think about it sometimes. I don't let myself think about it for too long. What I know is that I drove back down that mountain. I called my sister. I sat in her kitchen and ate a cake I'd made for a man who wanted me gone, and something in me decided, quietly and without drama, that I was not going to be gone. I'm still in the house. I've repainted the kitchen, the warm terracotta I'd always wanted, but we'd never agreed on. I have dinner with Philippa on Thursdays. Waverly texted me last week to tell me she'd gotten a promotion, and I sent her 3 exclamation points because I genuinely meant them. My father called me a few months ago. He'd been updated in pieces as things unfolded, but this was the first time we talked properly. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "I'm sorry, Imogen. I'm sorry I didn't push harder on the prenup." I told him it wouldn't have changed what I heard at that cabin. It wouldn't have changed what Kieran was capable of. He said, "No. But it might have protected you faster." And he wasn't wrong. I don't have a tidy ending for you. I'm not standing on a beach somewhere with a new life fully assembled. I'm in Denver, in my house, with my terracotta kitchen, figuring out what the next chapter looks like from inside the chapter. But I'll tell you what I have. I have a checking account that's only mine. I have an attorney who knows my name. I have a sister who opens the door in her bathrobe at 9 at night without asking questions. I have a therapist who reminds me every week that building something real requires knowing what's actually in the foundation. And I have a recipe for brown butter bourbon cake that is genuinely excellent. The kind of thing you make for yourself when you feel like it. The kind of thing nobody has to earn. I've thought a lot about what made Kieran believe he could get away with it, and I don't think it was arrogance exactly. I think it was the slow accumulation of being trusted completely, trusted without being questioned, Trusted because I had built something with him that I believed in, and that belief became its own kind of blindness, not stupidity. Belief. There's a difference, and I think it matters. What I know now, on the other side of all of it, is that the choices we make quietly, the ones we think nobody will ever see, are the ones that shape everything that follows. Kieran made those choices over months. The cash withdrawals he didn't explain. The insurance policy he applied for without my knowledge. The yeah, he said at that cabin, easy and relieved, like a man who had already decided. None of those were accidents. They were direction he chose, one small step at a time, and the direction accumulated into something that could not be undone. And I made choices too. I chose to drive back down that mountain instead of walking through that door in a situation I couldn't control. I chose to call Philippa instead of sitting alone in a gas station parking lot until I fell apart. I chose to walk into an attorney's office and say, out loud, the thing I was most afraid to say, that the man I had built my life with had been planning to end mine. Those choices accumulated too. They became the foundation of what I have now. There's something I want to say about the forensic accountant, the quiet man with the wire-rimmed glasses who found the fraudulent policy. He didn't find it because I was lucky. He found it because I had made a decision to look, to actually look, clearly, at what was in front of me, rather than what I needed it to be. That's the part that required the most from me. Not the legal process, not the logistics of separating finances, not even the emotional weight of accepting that my marriage was not what I thought it was. The hardest thing was choosing to stop protecting a story that was hurting me. I think about Waverly sometimes, how she called me crying, how she said she'd had a feeling something was wrong and hadn't known what to do with it. I don't hold that against her. We are all at some point carrying a feeling we don't know how to act on. The question is whether we eventually act on it anyway. She did, in her way, by showing up after. By sitting across from me at dinner and being honest. That takes something. I know it does. The cake is what I keep coming back to. 3 hours of work, a recipe from a dead woman's index card, a white box on a passenger seat. I made it out of love, or what I thought love required of me. And I ate it at midnight with my sister, and it was good, and nobody had to earn it. That's the thing I'm still learning. That what I build, with my hands, my time, my attention, belongs to me first. That care is not a debt I owe to anyone who asks for it. That I get to decide what I make and who I share it with, and what I walk away from when I have to. I'm still in Denver. The kitchen is terracotta now. I made the cake again last month, just for myself on a Sunday afternoon, and I ate it with coffee and didn't share it with anyone, and it was exactly enough.